Hey everybody, Jeff Tidwell here with another one of my tweet videos for you today. It is September 1st, August is already over, so we're already almost to fall. Of course, I can be found on Twitter at RealJeffTidwell. I'm also on Minds. They had their Minds IRL event in Philly this past weekend, which looked pretty cool. Unfortunately, I could not attend. Of course, I'm also on Gab. Check out their free speech web browser and Dissenter app, www.dissenter.com. It's a pretty cool way of commenting on any URL online. Of course, I am also on Parler, Telegram, and Instagram. If you're not watching this video on BitChute, you're watching it on YouTube. So if you enjoy the content today or any other time, please do like and subscribe. Hit the little bell below for notifications, and if you find my cadence to be a little bit on the slow side, you can hit the 2x speed button and get all of the information in half the time. Time is the currency after all, so that's double bang for your buck. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into some tweets for today. Now, we might be in September 2019, but we're going all the way back in time to my June 2018 tweets, beginning with this one right here. So here's an experiment you can try with a friend. Try this experiment with a friend. Number 1, ask them who their favorite entertainer is. Wait for a response. Number 2, ask them how long they've been a fan of that entertainer. Wait for a response. 3, say, they're a negative term, right? They're a negative term. 4, gauge your friend's facial expressions. So you can throw any negative term you'd like in there and try it out. Do it for science. So what this experiment is about association, okay? So we always, we find positive associations with entertainers and public figures, which draw our interests, our attention to them. Okay, usually it's not negative. If you like something, you have positive association. If you don't like something, it's a negative association you have. In some regard, it might have something to do with the content, the material. If it's, say, for example, a stand-up comic like, Dave Chappelle, who recently got canceled by quite a few people after his new special Sticks and Stones came out on Netflix. Definitely check that out. It's one of the better, if not the best, stand-up comedy special I have seen in a long time. Dave Chappelle really hit it out of the park. And he did it at a time when political correctness, the code of PC, has been taking over a bit of Western society. And so Dave Chappelle did the exact opposite. He went back old school in comedy. He went back to a time when you could say things that you could not get away with on Twitter without being accused of hate speech or whatever arbitrary term they'd like to apply when they're trying to limit your free speech. But Dave Chappelle, it was funny. The form, his performance, the material. Again, humor is subjective, of course, so you may not appreciate it. And I find that a lot of the mainstream critics are not crazy about it. They are putting a bit of a negative association on it. So if you're asking your friend, ask your friend who their favorite entertainer is. So let's just say it's Louis C.K. Now, Louis C.K. did something that maybe he shouldn't have done in the presence of other adults, but he apparently, I don't want to get it wrong, but I think he masturbated. Tell me if Louis C.K. masturbated in front of somebody in the comments section below. I'd like to know your input on that. But, of course, he was very soon after essentially canceled, because we live in this cancel culture, this boycott culture. When somebody does something that we don't like, regardless of what it might be, it could be something truly offensive, or it could be just they have the wrong political opinion, or maybe they use the wrong word once or twice. So then you ask them how long they've been a fan. So they usually, people will have a long history of positive associations. What if I told you there was a dark underbelly to your favorite entertainer? Like, what would you say if I called them, say, a sexist or a racist, or if I said they were low IQ, or if they were insensitive, if they didn't care about this group or that group, if they weren't egalitarian enough? Say if I made it personal. Say if I, threw out some personal event that may have happened that was quite negative and made you question their character. Whether it's true or not, try it out. Because they can then, take a look and see, well, how many positive associations with this entertainer do I have? Do I have enough so that when bad association comes in, if I hear that they maybe, got involved in an altercation or some sort of battery or assault, may it be just physical with another person, or if it may be sexual or something, whatever it might be, like Louis C.K. and his masturbation. What will it take for you to stop listening to your favorite band, to stop listening to your favorite entertainer, your favorite singers, your favorite actors and actresses? Like, how much goodwill have they generated that you can, you can take the heat? They can take the heat. I don't know. It's a great question. That's why we're doing this thought experiment. So after you've waited for a response, you say, they're a negative term, right? So, yes, we live in this culture now where it's all about guilt by association. You need to be associating with the right groups. You don't want to associate with somebody that's marked or labeled. It is a symbol of bad. Okay, you want to stay within the right think world over here. You don't want to go into wrong think territory, whatever it might be. Maybe it's speech or action, or just the clothes they wore, whatever it might be, whatever kind of statement they made. You don't want to be in the bad groups. This is what they do. When they hear that an entertainer, a very persuasive person, is going against the narrative or the ideology of the day, whatever it might be, that they're using to socially engineer us and get us in that narrow little echo chamber, that Overton window of acceptable dialogue. Anybody that goes outside those walls is considered extreme, perhaps even hateful. They might be somebody that uses hate speech. Once again, arbitrary, made-up term, very subjective, and it means something different to everybody. And in fact, it's not even covered by the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America. It's not in that, that's one of the greatest free speech documents in the world. And of course, you don't have hate speech in there. So Dave Chappelle said a bunch of things that go against the code of the modern religion, that is social justice. So he became a martyr of another modern religion called censorship. Now people, of course, he hasn't been deplatformed. This is because Dave Chappelle, with his Sticks and Stones special, he's been doing this for 30 years. People know him. They know he's an entertainer. And he was able, unlike many other people in this world that work within comedy, that work within the artistic world, he had so much leverage. He had so much rope. Some people think he hung himself. I think that he hoisted a flag for free thought. And of course, it was very funny. And this is the thing about, combining comedy, trying to, put a filter of morality on comedy. Comedy is funny because it's wrong. Okay, by nature it's wrong. By nature it's off. By nature it's not, you get into a comedic situation, it's because things are going the opposite of good for the characters. They're in a crazy situation, or a joke might revolve around just something that normally would not be helpful. It wouldn't be moral. It would be a harmful situation that could hurt their reputation, that could hurt their job, that could hurt their family. But it's funny seeing them try to get out of that. We have to look at that darkness, that real situation somebody might be in, and derive humor from it, because otherwise it's just depressing. It's darkness. It's blackness. It's this dark thing that nobody can laugh about. It's a human experience that we can't offer any catharsis for, because, well, it's inappropriate, it's offensive. But again, it's not your right not to be offended, right? It's not your right not to be offended. That's not in the Constitution. That's not in any of the charters. The UN hasn't ruled that you can not be offended lest it's something punishable by law. It hasn't happened. So you gauge your friend's facial expressions, and you see how deep their love affair for that entertainer goes. Will it bounce right off of them? Or will they start to feel like, well, if I associate with this entertainer, if I like their work, maybe I'm guilty by association. I'm condoning, I am platforming hate, or I'm platforming something that is unacceptable. That's what they'd like people to do. They'd like people to question anybody that goes outside of the box, anybody that decides to, be their own authority figure and just say what they're going to say, within law. There's no libel, slander, defamation going on. It's comedy. It's art. They're able to do that. And, either you're for free speech or you're against it. There's only two ways you can go, and of course you do have the right to speak up and say, well, I do not condone this, I boycott this. But I feel like this association game where you want to put people into, the bad box or the good box, and then they start to turn it political. They say, well, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, and then I'm going to boycott anybody on the other side of the aisle if they have a business, if they have a product, if they're doing a show or a service. I'm going to go ahead, and because of their political ideology, I'm going to try to drain their money supply, their resources, so that they can't speak anymore, that they don't have any clout, any more merit in the public square. We're going to take all of their credibility away by making sure they have no money, so they have to go begging on the streets. And hey, if we can cancel them along the way, even better, that'll show them. Just this moralizing of every situation has become, the last time I remember it being this wild, it was long before the devoutly secular and their modern religions, but back when Christian fundamentalists were the ones that, I grew up in a Christian household, Protestant. My parents were Protestant. And, I remember when we had things that could not come into the household. Like my parents would say, look, you can't have this game because it has strange religious imagery. I think that game was Heretic. Actually, this is actually exactly what it was. I just remembered when I was about 9 or 10 years old, maybe 11. My parents said, you can't get Heretic, which was a Doom clone by Raven Software, released back in 1994, 1995. First-person shooter. So it was okay to play Doom. Okay, my Christian fundamentalist mother said, it's okay to play Doom. But you can't, because you're killing the demons, maybe, I don't know. But you can't play Heretic. The religious symbolism is too much. So they kept me away from it. They said, well, no, it's no good. And then one day my dad went ahead and he said, well, look, honey, he's playing Doom. He's playing Wolfenstein 3D. He's playing Duke Nukem 3D. If we can let him look at these pixelated prostitutes and things like that, the strippers in the game, he's like, come on. Take the logical leap. But yeah, no, you can easily dissuade people from having a certain thought process or ideology by removing any people in their lives that might have an independent voice that, goes against the narrative, that goes against, what society dictates is normal. It's been going on for decades. It's been going on for many, many years. There will always be a counterculture. It just depends on the timing, which paradigm we're in, and who is in power. That changes the rhetoric quite a bit. But it's a fun experiment. You might piss off your friends, so if you do piss off your friends, let them know that it was Jeff Tidwell's idea and that they should come and subscribe to the channel for more of that. Get back at you with another pro tip. So on the subject of morality, moral absolutism is incompatible with an imperfect world where right and wrong are relative, subjective, and arbitrary. Okay, so we do live in a world that has objective truth. There is a sort of order to things in this world that can be observed. But by and large, we live in an imperfect world where everybody, different forces of nature, different people, even businesses now, whenever we create something new, a new life form, everybody's vying for their best interest. We live in a world of rational free will in which people, animals, organisms, they go on a survivalistic journey to get to their goals. They go through these systems, whatever it might be, but they get to their goals. And that is, of course, being successful, surviving. But with moral absolutism, thinking in absolutes is a fool's errand. And of course, you have these people that also think in postmodern ideology, and they apply absolute filters, absolute labels, and give certain signals that they consider absolute. They put you into a group and say you are absolutely that group, that association, and there's no gray area. I've placed you here, you're in, and it might be, as I said earlier, the bad group. And you want to be on the good team, right? Maybe if you change your thoughts, change your ways, change your ideology, you can be with us in right think land. Of course, right think is subjective. It's relative. And it's rather arbitrary. We don't live in a world where you can look at a situation. It's far too complex. You can't look at a situation that's so complex and say, well, there's one solid way to go with this. There's one moral way to go. That's just not the way that it is. There's often a lot of factors in play that make it harder for people to make a simple decision. Now, the leaders do have to go ahead and make that decision. They have to make a hard choice. They have to choose between, trying to save everybody and having a 60% chance of losing everybody, or saving 80% and having a 100% chance of saving those people. These are complex moral decisions that are being made. And again, right and wrong are relative, subjective, and arbitrary. People have a different idea. We have 7 billion perspectives in this world. They have a different idea of what is right, what is wrong, and what is in between, what's allowable. So when you're taking an absolute position and you're not allowing any movement, of course, when you're talking rhetorically with people, you might want to stand your ground and not look weak. You might want to be at both sides of this, but be able to take either side at a given time to make sure that you do have order, you do have a system, and laws that you go by, personal, moral, ethical laws that you go by. You can't be on the fence about every issue. It's just not the way it is. We all have our bias, our in-group preference, and so forth. But yeah, you're not going to find any truly easy answers in an imperfect world. As I discussed in another one of my tweet videos, you have a situation where, perfection is a fallacy. So, you have to have a very ordered, specific world, a very limited box, as it were, before you can actually define what is perfect. Like, do you check all the boxes of that box? If you check all the checklist items of that list, to reach moral virtue, to reach a place where you're dramatically emphasizing morality over immorality in a given situation, you'd have to have a certain smaller box. So otherwise, in general, it's subjective. Everybody has their own belief as to what's important, what's more moral, what's more immoral. There are some universal truths to what's morally virtuous. We don't want to lie too much. Okay, everyone lies all the time, to themselves, to everybody else, but we want to be as honest as possible. We also don't want to rape, murder, or steal. Obviously, those things, you're not going to make an argument to say, well, it's okay to do that, unless you want to get into some morally questionable waters, which again, in a complex system, you're bound to do, but you don't want to go there unnecessarily. So yeah, moral absolutism is at times a fool's errand. And of course, if you do believe in a traditional religion, if you have God or Allah in your life, if you're Hindu, Buddha, a Buddhist, or, if you're Jewish, or whatever your viewpoint might be. Or if you're devoutly secular and you believe in a modern religion, such as social justice, censorship, moral panic, institutions, global warming, outrage culture, or even celebrity. You might turn to a authority figure and you might appeal to it. You might say, well, look at this. Science! But of course, you ignore sometimes the other side of that scientific question. You just say, well, I go by this one person, this one academic in the modern religion of institutions, and I go by this one media voice. I don't listen to this side of the argument because I know it's wrong. And it might be. It might be wrong. You might have placed it aside. For all intents and purposes, you are not coming back because it's just not part of your belief system too. It's almost impossible to morally judge somebody. So that's why I say it's incompatible with this imperfect world, where right and wrong are relative, subjective, and arbitrary. So Bernie Sanders is running for president in 2020. I think he's about third in the polls behind Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren. And I was talking to Senator Sanders over Twitter last year. And I said, regarding when he was talking about intellectual dishonesty, because honesty is Bernie's brand. Honesty is Bernie's brand, and he tries to, as much as possible, tell it straight, of course. That doesn't mean that he's right or that, his system of democratic socialism is necessarily the most virtuous we could use, the most successful we could use, but he does have honesty as his brand, so he says something about intellectual dishonesty here. Let me go ahead and bring that up. Bernie Sanders says, to be politically successful, Trump needs to create enemies and divide us up. He needs to turn men against women, white against black, straight against the LGBT community, Christian against Muslim, native born against immigrant. We will not let him win. So I say that's intellectual dishonesty. And I say that I dislike how your brand has changed, but I accept it. Good luck with this approach. And then I further clarify here, intellectual dishonesty, since everything that Bernie said is correct in a post-truth context, because we are dealing with politics here, which is a post-truth realm, I say I'm implying that Trump does not need to engage in intersectionalism, the modern religion of social justice. That is to say, identity politics. It's generally collectivist, cultural Marxism, social Marxism. I'm implying that Trump does not need to engage in intersectionalism to win, and neither do you. It is a waning tactic, and it's destroying everything. So in my last video, I went after intersectionality, and so I guess I can go after intersectionality again. If you like when I go after intersectionality, leave me a comment in the comments section below, or drop a comment on the Dissenter app if you have Gab. So, yeah, they say that Trump is trying to divide people up. Now, I'm not saying that politicians in the Republican Party and Democrat Party don't do that. They do that. It is an old way. We know from the Southern strategy, we know from the identity politics, the politically correct push of the last 2 decades or so. So, I've come to the conclusion that, for the most part, the world is divided up into, and I'm going to do it right here. I'm going to do the division right here. It's divided up into people that think more collectively versus those that think more independently. The individual versus the group. So I don't think, I say I'm agnostic to the modern religion that is social justice. I don't think that it's the best way forward for finding equality and equity. Those are things that I want. I believe in the goals in some respect, the overarching egalitarianism, the taking care of those that can't take care of themselves mentality. If you have the rich as the oppressor and then the poor below, I want to look out for the little guy as much as any socialist claims to. But I do find that over time, when you're by design separating people into groups, you're saying men, women, you're saying white, black, Asian, Hispanic, whatever it might be, whatever ethnic or cultural background you might have, whatever religion you might be, whatever sex or gender you might be or identify as, whatever pronouns you might use, whatever, like I said, religion, occupation, even hobbies. We have seen gamers go under the lens of the microscope in recent years due to Gamergate. It's all about grouping people up, dividing them up and saying, well, do you want to be with the gamers or against them? Do you want to be with the men or against the men? Do you want to be with the women or against the women? Because if you vote this way, or if you do this thing, if you support this entertainer or this politician, you get into opposing the good group. If you oppose the good group, well, in a binary world, a one-dimensional world, that automatically puts you outside the ring. If you're, not an anti-fascist, you're a bad person. If you're not anti-racist, well, you are, my friend, a racist. If you're not progressive, you're against progress. And if you're not conservative or libertarian, you don't believe in conservation or liberty whatsoever, that's the box you're in. Call it a day. I don't believe in that. I think everybody has their own individual merits and flaws. Their character should be assessed if we're going to judge people at all, and we all do judge. We are pattern recognition machines that look around, and we have associations with things that are good, bad, and in between. So I understand that we have a natural propensity to be discriminatory. We are very discriminating when we're picking out the grapes or picking out whatever we are at the supermarket, at the grocery store. We are looking for quality. We're looking for things we like. And that's just the way that our brains work. We are, bigoted, looking for the best for ourselves by design. I'm not saying intelligent design, but that's just the way that our systems work. So with intersectionality, I don't think that we need to be putting men and women against each other, or if we need to be, talking about race every 5 seconds. The Marxist ideology is all about class differences. You have your rich bourgeois class, and you have the serfs and the other people below, however you'd like to classify it. So there is this difference. There is this idea that we don't want to give the rich too much power because we come up with things like the oligarchy and the aristocracy and the plutocracy. All these different things can be derived from a system where there's great wealth inequality. But of course, we also live in a system, we also use a system called capitalism, in which a high tide can lift all boats. I'm not talking about trickle-down economics, the Reagan-era stuff. I think we should have tax cuts. I think that we should have a system where people are encouraged to work hard, to try to be the best, to try to build their merit and work their way up in the system. And I think they should be given as much opportunity as possible. This is talking about my goals, not the systems to get there. I don't think that intersectionality or the modern religion that is social justice is the best way to get to this more equitable world, because you are generating racism. Might be altruistic, but you are generating racism, otherism, sexism, because you're taking the third wave, fourth wave feminism, the intersectional feminism, you're taking different people and breaking them down into subcategories and saying, well, you have this category, and this category, and this means you have this many victim points. Now, if you ask an intersectionalist, they'll say, don't listen to Jeff Tidwell. You don't know what you're talking about. You're wrong. Get lost. Fuck off. They might say those things because they want to, they believe in it. Again, I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm saying that I don't think it works best. But you're going to have people that are collective thinkers. They think strength in numbers, and we are on our team, we're in this group, and we feel the collective, the familial feeling, the association we have as part of our identity. I personally know that, because I have, white skin, or I have my Anglo background, whatever it might be. If I'm male, I know that I have in-group preference. I know that I'm looking for mirrors of myself out there, and I prefer, in general, things that are familiar. So if everybody, starts to associate and communities form, you have each of the subgroups. If you break it down, well, the straights have a group, and the gays have a group, and this has a group, and that has a group. You keep on grouping, and ultimately what you're doing is you are dividing people up. Identity politics, intersectionality, it is dividing people up. So I think it is lightly hypocritical for Bernie Sanders to come out and say, well, Trump, don't divide people up. Because, yeah, Trump is appealing to the constituents, the people, the voters, in a way that they're familiar with, that they're used to. And there is, people can say it if they want. If they think that there's a racial tinge to it, I can't say that there's a racial tinge. I don't see it. Many people across all races, genders, occupations, religions, whatever group, whatever immutable characteristic you might have, or a non-immutable, something that's part of your life by choice, people of all different backgrounds have fallen behind Trump. They like Trump. They like what he stands for, because ultimately the primary identity that Trump appeals to, and they don't like this because it's nationalism. Nationalist. That means America first. Americans first. Not splitting us up into races or sexes or whatever it might be, but actually bringing us all together and saying, you're either an American or you're not an American. And it's the federal government's solemn duty to look after Americans first. And Trump has brought that back. It's always been the case, but over the past couple of years, with President Bush, and that's George W. Bush, and President Obama, there has been a little bit more of a globalist emphasis, taking away jobs from America, outsourcing, getting the TPP going. Thankfully, it was, had been kiboshed. There are two schools of thought, collectivism and individualism. I believe in individuality. It is perhaps at some point self-defeating if you look only inward and you don't reach out to people to help you and to be your friends, to associate with you. If you look only inward, you might not like what you find if it's just you. Of course, we have the world we interact with. We have things we create. We write stories. We do creative things. We do woodworking. We do knitting. We do all sorts of things that bring our expression of ourselves into the world, and people can associate with it and like it and see themselves in it. Look for that mirror in you and find it. Find common appeal. So intersectionality, good intended, well intended, you know where that goes, what road that paves. And so in the long run, we have yet to see exactly what the social Marxist movement of putting people into groups and saying, well, you have oppressive groups and you have oppressed groups, and we want to help the oppressed groups by taking away from the oppressor class. But they never have an answer for why, what happens once, they go after the majority, because the majority rules under democracy. We love democracy, which is, direct democracy is tyranny. But they'll not have an answer for why, what happens when the oppressor becomes the oppressed. Is there a transitional period? Do we decide not to put affirmative action or whatever it might be against this group? When do Asians get fairness in college test scores? Questions like that. Why are they, seen as the oppressor? Aren't they a minority group? And then that's the real tell for intersectionality. When it starts to break down, when you have people from one feminist group fighting another feminist group and saying, well, you don't really believe in the modern religion. You haven't placed your faith over reason and gone into our, haven't become disciples. I don't want to use another word, but I'll call it a modern religion. You come into our modern religion, but you're a different denomination. You're a different sect. And we have conflict. I'm like, look, if you're going to have a postmodern ideology, and you're going to take us using absolutism and postmodernism, bring us into clown world, I think you guys need to be at least on the same team with this, because enough people are already looking at the situation and going, yeah, the battle might be almost over. If you're talking about female wage gap or whatever it might be, gay marriage has been the law of the land for almost 10 years. Democrats wouldn't get near it for so long. Like Obama was even a civil unions Democrat. Hillary Clinton didn't get on board until after about 2011, 2012. But we've gotten this societal progress where we see, it's okay to be gay. It's okay. All these things are part of our culture now in a way they were never before. I think it was, a lot of people were just, don't ask, don't tell. But now we're in a place where it's better. People can actually express themselves fully and live the full experience. And of course, there are challenges ahead. There are things that have not been resolved. There is still animosity. There is still discrimination. There is still some hatred out there. But not as much as people purport. Things have changed over the years. It's just a question of, has the rhetoric changed? Or does it keep on getting more and more extreme? Do you keep an absolute position and have this absolute moral superiority over the situation and say, well, we're not there yet? Well, who decides when we're there? Who decides when the oppressor becomes the oppressed? Who decides all this stuff? People. Institutions are just people. That includes the popes and the prophets of modern religion. These postmodern ideologies for the devoutly secular, and some people that are non-secular as well, might fall into outrage culture. They might want to look at somebody saying a joke they don't like, or using the wrong words, or whatever it might be, not understanding a situation, and go, well, I'm outraged. I have to point this out to get moral virtue and universal truth. I need to, enlighten the world. I need to preach, point out what I see. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good. But intersectionality, I wish I could get behind it more. There are some, good messages in there about looking out for those that have trouble standing up for themselves. That's something virtuous to think about. But it's all about taking it just a step too far. And it is destroying things. I think that identity politics will be under referendum in 2020. People already voted against political correctness in 2016 when they elected President Trump. So it's just a matter of time before, it gets locked in, I think. I do think that people are tired of being told what to say. They're tired of people they love being canceled, or they're tired of being called a bigot by anybody that disagrees with their sort of mundane political positions and opinions. They're basically a generic conservative. They like lower taxes. They like the free market. Oh, they're a bigot. Okay. Doesn't make any sense to me. I think people are tired of it. Onward and upward. There are no logic centers in the heart. Alrighty then. Checking the viewfinder. So last week I talked a little bit about being a Jedi. So here's more on being a Jedi and priming in art. On being a Jedi. No human being has been gifted with the ability to read another's mind. We can build narratives in our own mind of what others believe, based on what they've chosen to communicate, but we can only approximate from that through our individual lens on reality. When one observes any form of media, its meaning can morph based on points of reference that the observer has absorbed in the past. Skilled purveyors of media, may it be art, journalism, etc., know how their audience has been primed. They present new information accordingly. An example of priming in art, an experimental musician can prime both themselves and their audience for a new artistic direction by dabbling in those ideas with a side project or a smaller release. When the time comes for a bigger statement, all parties are ready. However, how the musician frames their experimental work is important to how they proceed. If viewed as an A/B test to see how it impacted their audience, all parties are ready, including those that walked away. It may boil down to what the artist prioritizes: expression or commerce. Okay, so we'll start from the top here. On being a Jedi. No human being has been gifted with the ability to read another's mind. So mind reading, of course, is impossible. I shouldn't have to tell you that. You should know it. But if you've been on Twitter lately, well, you might have forgotten. Because a lot of people like to straw man, they like to mind read, they like to project about what you're thinking. It makes it easier. If they have an easy target to knock down, they've presented, you don't really have a chance to respond. They just present you as they see you, and then you listen to them, make up some word salad. So, no mind reading, and we build narratives of what other people are like in our minds. We build narratives of what others believe based on what they've chosen to communicate. So whatever they've given us for information about themselves, and again, you can barely say anything outside of this narrow window, depending on whose window it is. If it's the social justice left's window, it's rather small. They've gotten rid of so many words using the modern religion of censorship that it's getting harder and harder. They can go around, talking about what they consider to be the oppressor all day, but, anything outside the code of political correctness is not allowed. So people do choose to communicate things. They have body language, they have words, they have behaviors. If someone does something, it's perfectly acceptable to go, well, hey, based on your actions and words, I'm making a judgment call. That makes sense. But we can really only approximate from that information because we have our individual lens on reality. We have our own window into the world, and it's very biased. It's very conditioned. We have our good associations, we have our bad associations. And we have things we like, we have things we don't like. It goes on, and it's all very subjective. There are some objective truths. We talked about objective morality just a little while ago. But, people have their own individual look. They don't see it through the group lens, is what I'm saying. Not naturally. That is something you put on top of your individual lens. You might put a group filter on it. You might say, as the New York Times did with their 1619 project, everything is racism. If you change the frame, you change the game. Well, we're changing the frame to racism everywhere. And we're going with this for the 2020 election, in which, we have marked President Trump as a racist. We just throw that adjective before every sentence to do with Trump. Racist comment. Well, what's racist about that comment? Oh, well, it's racist because we said it was. We just threw the word racist on it. It's a very powerful system. Just like the nickname system. You put a nickname on somebody, then people go, wait, is Joe sleepy? Is Joe Biden Sleepy Joe? Is Jeb Bush low energy? I don't know. I didn't think it before, but now that there's a word, there's an adjective before his name, I'm starting to see it. I'm starting to get that. That view, it modifies your filter on the situation when somebody puts an adjective, when they prime you to view something differently. When one observes any form of media, its meaning can morph based on points of reference that the observer has absorbed in the past. So, of course, two people can look at one situation and see entirely different things. They can look at one piece of art, like the Chappelle special, and see something different. They can see two different sides of the same thing. So those that like politically correct stuff don't like Chappelle. Those that like politically incorrect stuff can handle Chappelle, because there's so many negative associations with all those things. They've been socially engineered, they've been conditioned by themselves, by their family, friends, the media, and even academia and state, the full range of the modern religion that is institutions. They've gotten all these negative associations. Now, how can you like somebody? How can you laugh at something that has so much negativity as a focal core part of it? It becomes almost impossible. That's why, I think that when you have these media outlets that have been, they're giving the Chappelle special all these negative reviews, yeah, they have the right to give their opinion. It's subjective. Humor is subjective. But the fact is that a lot of these outlets, they have gone ahead with a full frontal, full force intersectional agenda where they're trying to police speech. They're trying to make sure you use the right pronouns. And Jordan Peterson actually came to prominence because he argued with this idea. But they try to make sure you stay within that narrow Overton window of acceptable dialogue. If you go outside, you're an extremist. You're a hater. So you need to stay inside. But they've fortified that message. They've reinforced that message so many times through their articles, through all the media, the echo chambers they allow themselves to not just vacation in, but live in. They have gotten all these specific associations, which then when you try to take some information that, contradicts that, well, they have their confirmation bias and they go, well, how can I don't even want to look at that. How can I take it in if when I first see it, the first impression is, I don't want to let that negative stuff in. I'm having a good day. I don't want negative stuff in my day. And that negative stuff, of course, is subjective. So, yeah, they have points of reference from the past. And, of course, the skilled purveyors of media, may it be art, journalism, stand-up comedy, for instance, they know how their audience has been primed. So if anybody is actually good at what they're doing when it comes to entertainment, for example, they do read what their critics are saying. They read what the clients are saying, the viewers, the audience they have. They're making sure that they stay on the same page as their clientele. They want to know what they like so they can incorporate it in their act, for example. If you're talking about the stand-up comedy, they want to pace their audience. They want to make sure they're primed. They might even tell you, well, before you listen to this new album of mine, check out this last one, or check out these other ones over here, because maybe if you listen to this more experimental one, if you like that, oh, this is more of that. It's just more mainstream, which is what we're getting to next. So they do. A really good purveyor, a really skilled artist will know how their audience has been primed and present new information accordingly. So they'll walk them up the steps from, a more accessible work, but once you've gotten used to it, you're bored with it. They'll bring you to something that's a little bit more intense, that, pushes the envelope, ups the ante, and starts to shock you and surprise you again in ways you didn't think possible, which is even crazier, even more impressive when it's something or somebody that's very familiar to you. And then they give you something that's new, and they blow your mind. They blow your mind right away. Because you didn't know that they were capable of that. They didn't know that you were capable of surprising them. And people love to be surprised. but it's better if they have a positive association first. So an example of priming in art, an experimental musician can prime both themselves, so they can get ready. Practice makes perfect. They can get ready, and their audience can get ready for a new artistic direction by dabbling in those ideas with a side project or a smaller release. So you'll often see somebody not go full, if you're talking about music, you'll see an experimental artist or even a mainstream artist. But if they're trying something new, you might see like an EP or something. You might not see the full artistic evolution showing itself on an LP because there's a risk-reward factor in there. And that has to do with expression and commerce. Sometimes if you're having a record financed by a record company, the record company might go, well, we like what you're doing, but we don't think it's going to sell. So maybe you should make this a smaller release. We won't promote it as much. It'll be out there. You can do maybe a little bit of a tour. But in general, we don't have a lot of faith in the commercial ability of this release. So maybe make it smaller. See how it does. A/B test. See how it works. Do the people like it? Do they want more of it? Do they want less of it? Do they want you to go back to your roots? And if you're an artist, that's an unlucky place to be because you might be forced to compromise artistically, and nobody likes to do that. So when the time comes for a bigger statement, all parties are ready. The audience is ready, and the entertainer is ready. The purveyor of the art is ready. However, how the musician frames their experimental work is important to how they proceed. Like I said, it's good to do a smaller, test small, do a smaller release, and then go ahead and see if it brings any new people in, if it satisfies the older people that have been with you for a long time. And then, of course, do an A/B test, see how it impacted your audience. And then, all parties are ready, which means that some people chose to go another way. They chose not to continue with you. They said, well, you've turned me off. It's going to take an act of God to bring me back into the circle, into the tent. But the people that, this is the thing they say about Twitter, actually. They say about YouTube and social media. Your subscribers, the followers you have, the ones that stick with you, are the ones you really want to cater to, the ones you really care about. You'll have lots of people passing through. They'll see one tweet of yours. They'll watch one video and they'll go, yeah, like and subscribe. Or they'll like a tweet. They'll retweet a tweet. And then they'll follow you. But then within about 3, 4, 5 more tweets, maybe more than that, if they didn't mute you, they'll see your stuff and they'll go, well, this isn't quite what I signed up for. I like that other thing you said, but you haven't talked about that in a while. And, time is the currency and my attention is limited, so I'm going to go back and either mute you or unfollow you. And it's meritocratic. Like, I find merit in what you were saying before. I don't find merit in it now, so I'm going to go and vote with my follow button or my wallet. So you'll have people walking away, but it really boils down to what the artist prioritizes. Do they care about sticking to their guns? And of course, I'm not talking about real guns. We did have another shooting in Texas this week, and I want to put out a word. I'm very sorry to hear about the events of the past week. I think it was Odessa. Had another mass shooting. I think 12 people might have been killed. But these artists, they stick to their guns. And they can either stick to their guns for expression, or they can go in a more commercial direction and say, well, we want to get bigger. We want to do something that's more accessible. We want more people to take it in because we like our audience. We love you guys, but we kind of know you'll be there most likely. So why don't we go in this other direction and see if we can pull in more people, see if we can create a larger mirror for people to see themselves in us. It's a large part of it. So, two more tweets for you today. I like this tweet. So this continues off of the 4 tweets I just spoke about. I have 2 more. But this will count as 1 tweet, of course. I said there were 2 more tweets. This will count as 1, and we'll do a couple smaller ones further on in the video. So talking about media morphing, or meaning morphing, meaning, purpose. So when I suggest that meaning can morph, I'm touching on the idea that each person perceives reality through a series of filters. They experience colors differently and experience colors perception. I was actually talking to a friend not too long ago, talking about how color doesn't really exist. We all have our own way of viewing it, and colors are not strictly defined. They're based on these different levels to our perception of like which way are the cones and rods in our eyes are working. I'd have to defer to a subject matter expert on that. So if you know anything about what I'm talking about, color not existing, do colors exist? Put a comment below. Thank you very much. So experience does color perception. The more information we have, the wider our filters become. They become wider and wider. Our window on what's happening opens ever further. And then I say below, I find it refreshing when I see a person discovering something good in a thing that they never appreciated before. A friend said to me the other day, paraphrased of course, I'm enjoying Latin music more of late. I'm enjoying Latin music and I haven't a clue what they're singing about. But I love the way that it makes me feel. That's great art. When you don't even know what they're saying, but the quality of the music, the tone, it transcends language. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So meaning can morph. It's because our reality is subjective in many ways, not at the core. You know, there are hard truths to the fact that you need your heart to beat, you need your brain to work. There's a number of things out there that objectively are moral or immoral. I'm not trying to say that all reality is subjective. Just our lens, just our window is subjective. It comes through our inner world. We have our inner world that only we know, and we have the outer world we perceive outside our head. And of course, that outer reality, we try to sense patterns because it makes it easier to navigate. But of course, there are such things as false positives, and there are such things as linguistic games that people play, and then not everybody knows they're involved in the linguistic game. But so you'll see somebody that might be doing something to do with like politics, for example. They'll be calling people names. They'll be putting labels on people. They'll be grouping them up back to the intersectional stuff. They'll be trying to find some way to separate people up, divide them, and then conquer their ideology, point out their thought crime, and conquer their ideology. So we do have our own inner reality that we project. We project it on the outer world, and we see what bounces back, and what bounces back we see as safe. And there's this entire system of our pattern recognition that doesn't get enough coverage sometimes. You know, we have so many people out there that are pro-science, but you don't really hear about this all that often. You hear about a whole lot of people losing their agency and getting dog whistles and having stochastic terrorism, you know, and pogroms and all these different things. But you don't really hear too often about the fact that everybody just looks at things differently. Scott Adams calls it 2 movies on 1 screen, which is a pretty good analogy for it. Our experience colors our perception. So the more time we've spent with something, the more time something's gone through our brain pathways, the more times it's been repeated, our confirmation bias and our cognitive dissonance muscles grow. We start to get really familiar and really settle into that reality. So experience does color our perception. We have associated certain patterns with good, bad, and whatever association you might want, but we know what patterns mean. And yeah, we can, if we're not very familiar, we can see a pattern and misconstrue what it means. Or we can try to think for other people. We can try to put ourselves and try to be empathetic, put ourselves in other people's shoes, and then try to see things how they might see it. And then you have the people that go out there and they start to argue and defend and attack on behalf of other people. Other people are the ones that you're offended on behalf of. And really what these people are, I'm just going to be blunt, busybodies. They're busybodies. They have nothing else to do. They need order and purpose, so they find modern religion. They find moral panic, outrage culture, or censorship. Just silence the people that are bad, the viewpoints that are bad, even if you're for free speech. But off on a tangent here. The more information we have, the wider our filters become. So the more we prime ourselves with new information, that we get used to different facts and figures and bits of the world that we weren't familiar with. Once we're familiar with them, they're just like an old friend. You might, love or hate them, but you know them. It's a known quantity. See, we fear the unknown. We have this great fear of the unknown, and it's so clear. People don't want, and I actually agree with this. I like stability. I like knowing what I'm getting into. Before I play a chess game, I want to know that where the pieces are and how many pieces there are and so forth. And if that shows how good I am at chess, I don't even know how many pieces there are if you polled me. Is it 48? I don't know. I'm not going to, that's for the whole board, and I'm not going to go there. I think it's 32. So our window on what's happening opens further when we get more information. So that's why I say more information is better. This is the free speech portion of the Jeff Tidwell tweet video. More speech is better. And more speech kills hate speech, because you want to let as many people talk and as many voices be heard, as many perspectives, as many sides be heard as possible. You don't want to be just removing voices because you don't see them. You see them as unsavory. Because what happens? They get validated as victims. You victimize them by removing their voice. And I'm not saying they're right or they're wrong. I'm neutral on this. But whatever the hypothetical situation is, you're removing their voice, and then they have something to fight against. You. If you're a disciple or a prophet of the modern religion that is censorship, you are generating hatred for yourself. They have a reason to dislike you. And that, we don't want that. We don't want more people that are already kind of, maybe a little bit unreasonable, a little bit on edge as it is, having a reason, a validation to feel like they're victims, like they have a reason to fight back. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, after all. So I find it refreshing when I see a person discovering something good in a thing they never appreciated before. You can't judge a book by its cover. The first impression is so important, but it's not the only impression. There is this everybody is their own world in a body. Everybody is their own world. And everybody has their own mind countries they like to visit as well. I talk about that in one of my other videos about discovering, Trekking Undiscovered Mind Country. That's another video. And of course, I have another video I want to pitch as well. I haven't seen too many views on this one, but it's called Rationalizing Forgiveness. Find that on BitChute or YouTube. Rationalizing forgiveness is something that I think we could all do more of. Because we've gotten into this world where people are thinking in absolutes, and they see something and they've got their opinion, and then they don't want to. They have cognitive dissonance if you bring something else in and try to tell them, well, maybe your opinion, my opinion changes all the time. Maybe your opinion is questionable. So I say question everything. But when somebody discovers something good in a thing they never appreciated before, that's a breakthrough. That's wonderful. That means that they reassessed something, they took a second look, they got a second impression, and they like it. So a friend said to me the other day, they said, paraphrased, "I'm enjoying Latin music more of late." I haven't a clue what they're singing about, but I love the way it makes me feel. Like I said, it transcends language. This sort of emotional feeling, the beauty of life, of art, of expression, doesn't have to be, something that you're familiar with. It can just be, maybe you're familiar in general. It's not like you're hearing an alien orchestra for the first time, but it's just this emotion that flows through it. It just, that's connectivity. That reconnects us. Music reconnects us because it operates on this wordless plane, and it can be very persuasive too. It can be very persuasive. It can add so much. I remember, I forgot the guy's name, Michael Giannini or whatever, Michael Giannino. I got it so wrong, but tell me in the comment section below, who was the composer for Lost and a number of other J.J. Abrams joints? He was really, really good. These composers that just pull your heartstrings, and they know just what everybody can get on the same page with these emotions, these feelings, and they move you. Yeah. I haven't a clue what they're singing about, but I love the way it makes me feel. That makes me feel good. That statement makes me feel good. So, all right. One more tweet for you today. Okay, so this one is on the information age, which is slowly coming to a close. On the information age, the war of ideas has gradually moved from desert battlefronts to digital subforums. Dirty bombs are becoming passé. DDoS attacks are en vogue. Technological innovation is driving human evolution as we trade bloodlust for the pursuit of pure mind share. So this is referring to the fact that, yeah, we are slowly but surely moving into a world of information warfare. Infowars, if you could say that. If you're an Alex Jones fan, and now this video has been permanently demonetized for saying Infowars and Alex Jones, thank you very much. But yeah, in the information age, we have so many forms of cyber attack, of crime that can be done. You had Silk Road, and I do believe that and I don't remember the gentleman's name, but the person that ran and owned Silk Road is currently, there's a petition out there to lower his sentence or reduce it. And I do support that. I think that, he did something that was morally questionable, but he's not, he never, again, I'm not sure if he actually ever did any of the things he was purported to do. Think cryptocurrency and think of all the different dirty things you could do with a black market system where you have an anonymity and people can transfer currency anonymously. I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of seedy things, so I don't want to condone, what happened, but I don't think that, a life sentence is appropriate for someone that hosted. I do think the liability doesn't lie with him hosting the service. I think that the service would have existed either way. The liability isn't with him. And that's how I feel about, Twitter and Facebook as well. And speaking of DDoS attacks and hacking and cyber attacks, Jack Dorsey was just purportedly hacked and said some very not safe for YouTube things. I can't say them on YouTube, so they won't be there. But somebody hacked him, a team hacked him, about a week after they hacked somebody else, Charles something. I don't really have too much information on that one, so definitely do your research. But, Jack was attacked, and it goes to show you that even the oligarchs, the people we see as the upper crust, the 1% of the digital world, are not safe. But I do see that, really in a perfect system with the platforms, I could say that the curation of a publisher and the lack of liability for a platform should keep them separate. So you have the Communications Decency Act, I think it's Section 230, 1996. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. Comment below. But they separated platform and publisher. They always said, like, the platform has no liability for the user content, but publishers do have liability, but they also can use that content often to promote their own services, or they just have it in their database. But if you have both, if you have this, which they do, they're subsidized, and the big tech companies, they have subsidies and they have protection from liability, but they also have the ability to act as a publisher, to have absolute authority to censor, deplatform, and even debank. If they happen to be a financial company like PayPal or Patreon, they can debank, they can demonetize, they can deperson. Ultimately, when all the digital cartel, the digital vertical monopoly, they go ahead and they just take this one person, like Alex Jones, as I mentioned earlier. They take him and they go, well, we're not going to let you be on any of the services. We're going to de-host you. We're going to do all this stuff. And then you're basically erased. Your digital identity is erased from the internet, except for the few renegade rogue circles that allow you to still exist. So dirty bombs are becoming passé. The war of ideas has gradually moved from desert battlefronts to digital subforums. So you're seeing less and less of this crazy extremism out on the battlefield. You know, you do have your little pockets of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and we're working with Afghanistan. The United States is working with Afghanistan to sort of end our conflict there, but it's going to be very, very hard. But you're seeing more and more of these people. They're trying to proselytize people. The extreme, you know, I'm just going to say the extreme Islamists, the really, truly violent people that, you know, largely live over in the Middle East. There's very, very, very small portion of the overall population. Like, you have 1.5 billion Muslims in the world, and of that population, like, there's a diminishing amount of extremists. Part of that is the information age. Part of that is being able to discuss these things online and try to win people over online on forums and on social media, versus just grabbing them and bringing them in the fold and saying, grab a gun, you're with us. Whatever the process of getting into ISIS might be. Not something I want to talk about on too many of my videos. But those desert battlefronts became digital subforums, and dirty bombs became passé. So, of course, there is still warfare going on. DDoS attacks are in vogue. Technological innovation driving human evolution, and we're trading our bloodlust for the pursuit of pure mind share. So we don't kill people anymore. We just bludgeon them with our ideology until they come on board. You might have seen that on Twitter or elsewhere. They'll say, if you're not with us, you're against us. And if you're against us, well, you're in this giant group of people that includes, well, some unsavory individuals. Here's a hint. In any large group you put together, there will be bad people. They'll do bad things. And you'll have to watch out. Actually, you'll have to watch out for them. You'll have to watch out. It's very dangerous. But it's something that I look to casual fatalism to solve. I can't change that in a large group of people there are going to be some bad apples. I just don't want to throw out the entire baby with the bathwater, if you know what I'm saying. You know, we do have people that are troublemakers and they need to be addressed accordingly, but, you know, again, I am not the judge. Anytime someone tries to define free speech or define what is acceptable to you, remember, like, ask yourself, who is this person? Like, should I appeal to their authority? Do they have credentials? Do they have merit? Do they have a good character? Have I seen enough information? You know, it's tough. But technological innovation driving human evolution. So yeah, we are slowly but surely putting our guns away, and our bats and our rifles and whatever we might have, and we're finding our keyboards, because this is how ideas are getting across. This is how people are being indoctrinated into different religions or different modern religions. And yeah, there's still going to be people that don't find catharsis online. They don't play first-person shooters, or they don't play games that let them get their aggression out. They might not go online and type. I mean, I've found entire communities of people online that are just looking for an outlet. They just want an outlet. Like they need someplace to put these uncomfortable, these wrong, according to the society, the social structure, these off ideas. They are harmless, but they need somewhere to say them. They need to get them out, and we have that now. We have the internet. So, yeah, no, hopefully this will continue. Hopefully our conflict with Iran will be solved without too much bloodshed. Hopefully that the people there can get on the internet and they can, do what people here do. They can boycott. They can make their democratic opinion known. They can vote with their keyboards. They can type in what they want and tell the government there, like, look, we love you guys. We love our structure, but we need to be part of the world. And we don't want to deal with any more terrorist cells. We want to be a free and first world country. The people have to go on and make it clear what they like, Do what we do here again. Brigade. Brigade. If your government is holding you back, make it known. And of course, if you live in a country where you can't do that, unless you're going to be killed for it, well, then that shows you just how valuable the free world is and just how important it is that, for example, the United States and Americans defend what we have and not take it for granted. So I had a great time, guys. The video is coming to a close. If you liked what you saw today, please do give me a like and a subscribe. Hit the little bell for notifications. If you didn't like the video, give me a thumbs down because I believe in meritocracy. Of course, I can be found, Jeff Tidwell, on Twitter, @RealJeffTidwell. I'm also on Minds, Gab, Parler, Telegram. If you're not watching this on BitChute, you're watching it on YouTube. If you want to check out more of my art, we talked a lot about art today. Check me out on Instagram. And of course, everything I said today might be wrong. Or everything I said today might be right. Or perhaps some of it was right and some of it was wrong. I think that makes the most sense. So thank you again for watching. I hope everybody has a great night, great Sunday. Enjoy September, and I will see you next time.